Today, we look at the intriguing life of a guy who changed the world as we know it. Welcome to The Secret of Henry Ford. If you're new here, be sure to subscribe and ring the bell for more wonderful historical stories. Now, let us get started. Henry Ford, born on July 30th, 1863, on a farm in Greenfield Township, Michigan, was not your typical man. He was a visionary who saw beyond the constraints of his era. Ford's interest in mechanics and engineering began at a young age, but it was his unwavering pursuit of innovation and efficiency that distinguished him. Ford's mission to change the automotive industry was not simple. In fact, his first business, the Detroit Automobile Company, failed. But Ford did not give up. The Ford Motor Company was formed in 1903. What was the secret of his success? Not only did he build vehicles, but also how he constructed them. Ford launched the moving assembly line in 1913, a game-changing innovation that cut the time it took to produce a car from more than 12 hours to just 2.5 hours. This strategy not only improved production efficiency, but also made automobiles more affordable to the typical American. The Model T, which debuted in 1908, became the car for the masses. However, Ford's goal extended beyond automobile production. He believed in fair salaries and created the $5 workday in 1914, increasing his employees' average wage. This decision not only improved his employees' lives, but also increased production and loyalty, establishing a new norm in industrial labor practices. Ford was a principled man who was often regarded as a controversial person due to his beliefs and techniques. However, his influence on the automotive industry and industrial manufacturing is indisputable. Henry clearly had an aptitude for machinery. Perhaps the greatest leap in his development occurred when his father gifted him a pocket. "When I was 13, I got a watch." Henry rapidly learned himself how to disassemble and put it back together again. He practiced this over and over, gaining faster each time. Time passed, and he was soon earning money by repairing timepieces for people all throughout town. But a few months later, Henry had a life-changing encounter. Traveling to Detroit, Henry and his father saw their first horseless car. The tractor was powered by steam engine, and Henry was so enthralled by the gadget, he quietly pledged himself, said he would build his own car similar to that one. Unfortunately, this was also the year in which tragedy struck. When Henry was only 13, his mother died, due to problems during labor. Henry was closer to her than anybody else in the world, and her death left him heartbroken. He compared life on the farm without her to a watch without a mainspring. Henry came to despise his country life more than ever. He believed he was meant to higher things than milking cows and harvesting crops, but being the oldest son, his father, they anticipated him to eventually seize possession of their land. The strain increased until Henry finally chose to leave home at the age of 16 and abandon the family business, then head toward Detroit. This was a great disappointment for his father, and it put a lot of strain on relationship. Just a week into his new employment in Detroit, Henry received fired. Henry unexpectedly found himself alone in a new place with no income, yet strangely, help would arrive unexpectedly. Henry was saved by his father, who got him a job as a repairman at a machine business owned by a longtime friend of his. Though his father was angry with Henry for straying away from the family company, he saw Henry's exceptional mechanical ability and thought this work would benefit him. So Henry found affordable housing with his aunt and took on extra night work as a jeweler, repairman. He earned $5.50 a week from both jobs, and more importantly, Henry's role as the repairman permitted him to experiment with a wide range of machinery. This time was necessary, in his training as a technician effectively served as the schooling he never had. But after 9 months on the job, Henry concluded he had learned everything he could and returned home. In 1882, a neighbor approached Henry and asked for his assistance in operating a newly purchased steam engine. He approached the shaking machine, which was much larger than him, calmly referring to it as the little engine. Henry fueled the flames and adjusted the valves. Suddenly, the machine was up and running. The neighbor was so pleased, he offered Henry full-time work with a daily compensation of $3. But word quickly spread that this young man was putting up and operating a steam engine. Despite having no official training, at the end of the summer, a representative from Westinghouse, a business that produced steam engines, came and offered Henry a job as a steam engine repairman. Henry accepted and spent the next summers repairing motors across Michigan and Ohio. But Henry hadn't forgotten his dream. Throughout the winter, he tried to make his own steam-powered car, much like the one he'd been fascinated with when he was younger. However, despite endless hours of work, Henry just couldn't seem to accomplish it. Even though the first steam-powered vehicle was created in 1769, that engine and subsequent models worked on a track. Henry was determined to create a car capable of driving on the road. However, he discovered that steam engines were simply too heavy to be useful for rapid trackless vehicles. Thus, Henry was left with his dream but no apparent method to make it a reality. While flipping through a magazine, Henry Ford stumbled upon an idea advertised as a silent gas engine. Henry initially ignored the idea, believing it was too weak to be a sustainable source of power. However, a few years later, a corporation asked him to repair such an engine. This experience completely transformed Henry's understanding of gasoline combustion because it created far more. He got more energy than he expected, and the engine was much lighter. Henry realized he had finally discovered a machine to power his horseless car. He suggested to his fiancée, Clara, that they return to Detroit so he can learn more about gasoline engines. She agreed, which was fortunate because Henry had already taken a position in the city a week before as a repairman for the Edison Illuminating Company. Thomas Edison was among Henry Ford's heroes, and he believed this was the best location to work and study. This job gave him first-hand knowledge working with gasoline engines. Henry was quickly impressed with the company and quickly worked his way up to become chief engineer, where his income increased to $80 one week. But best of all, because the job only needed work on call, Henry had more time and freedom to focus on his own innovations, especially his horseless carriage concept, which he now realized was doable with a gasoline engine. In fact, at a work retreat, he finally got to meet Thomas Edison, who encouraged Henry should keep pushing the idea, and the two would eventually become good friends. To Henry's good fortune, he married Clara in 1888, and in 1893, they welcomed the birth of Henry Ford's only child, Edson. That same year, Henry stormed into the room on Christmas Eve and told his wife he had finally built his first gasoline engine. Admittedly, it was still pretty simple and barely ran for money. But all those years of fiddling paid off. Now that he knew how to build the engine, he could focus on his desire of making his own first horseless carriage. Henry spent the next 3 years working feverishly on the machine, employing parts that would have the factory discarded leftover tubing. By 1896, it was finally ready. The quadricycle was created by welding 2 bicycles together to form a square chassis. The car took its inaugural journey early on the morning of June 4th, 1896, and miraculously, the automobile drove quickly and consistently. However, other innovators have already developed working gas-powered autos. Henry's quadricycle was one of the fastest of its day, with a maximum speed of 20 miles per hour. However, Henry realized this was only the beginning, so he sold it. He sold his quad cycle for $200 and used the money to start construction of the second model of his automobile. This would take him another 3 years to complete. But when he was after that, he had a significantly upgraded version of his car. It was larger, faster, and operated more smoothly. At this moment, Henry was desperate to invent full-time, but just didn't have there is enough money to do so. He realized he'd need funding to pursue his ambition. So he set out to raise some money, prepared to take the biggest risk of his career, and form his own corporation. In 1899, Henry had the opportunity to drive a wealthy lumber merchant for 3.5 miles. Drive. At the end of the ride, the salesman was so fascinated with Henry's car that they instantly agreed to invest in Henry's new company.